And welcome everybody. It is December. It's October 10th, World Day Against the Death Penalty. I'm a little bit foggy because I've been up all night with the prayer vigil that's been ongoing at the state capitol here in Columbus, Ohio, where we have a bill to abolish the death penalty that's going to move. And next hearing is tomorrow, actually. But it's World Day Against the Death Penalty, the 21st. The theme today with this year's World Day Against the Death Penalty is torture, the torture of the death penalty. And we've got that ongoing. Let me share with you the message that Jedediah Murphy sent to Cantor Zusman a little while ago. See if I can find that. Here we are. It reads, let everyone know that this is now going to come down to the last minute. This is after, by the way. So Jedediah Murphy, if you don't know, is scheduled to be executed today at 6 p.m. Central Time in Texas. He's got a stay from a federal district court. He's got that stay upheld at the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, which alone is very unusual. The state of Texas is appealing. And earlier, Jedediah sent a message, very excited about the fact that it was likely to hold, he thought, or somebody told him, because this was unusual. But anyway, then he sent this message: let everyone know that this is not going to come down to the last minute, and it's not over, and pray that all this works out, and be blessed. And that's from a guy facing execution in about 7 hours from now in Texas. And we will be live starting at 5 p.m. Central Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, to hopefully celebrate the uphold of that stay, or to continue to watch together as we wait for the U.S. Supreme Court to determine. So we'll see what happens with that. But so that's the status. There's a lot going on. If you have seen death penalty actions, emails that have been going out, see links to all kinds of events that are happening today, including one immediately following this one with Missourians against the death penalty, and others talking about the Jewish perspective on the death penalty with Cantor Zusman, who's here on this program too, and so much more. So, really, it's a day that should actually be, for many of us, it is like all other days. It's a day to be against the death penalty and to do something about it. So thank you for being with us today. If you do social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, find the live stream on the Death Penalty Action channels, share them, and thank you for being with us. So with that, I want to turn it over to Alli Sullivan and Reverend Dr. Jeff Hood and Cantor Mike Zusman to talk about the new book that Alli and Jeff have created. It's called The Embodiment of Abolition. And, take it away, guys.
All right, I guess I'll go ahead and first of all, I want everyone to know that I'm not driving. I'm actually riding in the car with the lovely, vivacious doctor.
Yeah, just some books fell down.
Dr. Emily Hood, my wonderful wife, and we are having car issues today, and so we are driving all around town to get everybody where they need to go. With that said, I think this was a deeply spiritual project for me and Alli. We kind of certainly come at this from different spaces. I mean, obviously, I'm a Christian minister, deeply connected to the gospel of Jesus and the way of Jesus. Alli is, and of course, I'll let her speak for herself, but is not necessarily, perhaps she would fit in this spiritual but not religious crowd. And, so we've had a lot of really interesting conversation about what does it look like to see our work as abolitionists as spiritual, as something that is a spiritual practice in and of itself. And so, as we've kind of pushed into this project, we've we've engaged the experiences that we've had together. And I think it's really important to kind of speak to the fact that Alli is one of my dearest friends, a wonderful abolitionist in and of herself. And, you know, as we've engaged this project, again, it's come as we've engaged the work together. And, you know, a lot of the book is centered around the execution of Arthur Brown back in March. And one of the interesting things about that moment was that Alli had had a relationship with Arthur for a long time and had really cultivated that relationship. And I didn't really know Arthur at all. And Alli suggested to Arthur that, you know, I'd be his spiritual advisor, that I engage with him. And for the first time in, you know, kind of me doing this work, I met Arthur literally the day before the execution, and ultimately was with him in the execution chamber. And so to say that it was a moment of kind of a trial by fire would be an understatement. I mean, I didn't know him at all. And yet, because of Alli, he had chosen me to, you know, experience these most intimate moments with him. And so the book is the result of conversations that me and Alli had after those really visceral, intimate moments that were so incredibly painful, but also so incredibly illuminating, you know, just for this idea of what does it mean to embody abolition? What does it mean to embody this work? And I think certainly before you know, we began, and certainly as we have continued this, you know, I think that it always comes to this space of being willing to go to places that you never thought you would go, being willing to have conversations that you never thought you would have, being willing to be surprised and be shocked, and, you know, all of these different things. And so I think that as me and Alli engaged this conversation, that we experienced all of those things. And so, you know, Alli, I certainly would love for you to, you know, speak of how this got started in your mind, but also we're going to take the opportunity to kind of go through the chapters and go through the different themes that we engaged.
Yeah, so as Jeff said, this book started, well, we kind of discussed the idea, but it didn't really begin to be in the works until like almost immediately after Arthur Brown's execution. I was sitting at the airport the next day after Arthur was killed when we had our first discussion about the book. And I guess this is a perfect segue into the chapters. I don't know that we're going to go in order, but following Arthur Brown's execution, well, let me backtrack a little bit. I met Arthur around the time Kosal Chantakuman was executed last August. The day before Kosal was executed, I was sitting in the visitation room with him, and he's like, "Have you heard of the case of Arthur Brown?" And I'm like, "No." He's like, "Well, it's really well known." And so I planned to look up Arthur Brown's case and connect with him after Kosal was executed, because Kosal asked me to see if we could help Arthur. And that very night, me and Kosal's friend were leaving Huntsville after Kosal was executed. And the first thing I see when I opened my phone was Arthur Brown got his execution date while Kosal was being executed. And so immediately I knew I had to reach out. And from the beginning, Arthur was kind of back and forth on how he wanted to approach his execution, who he wanted to witness. At one point, we were talking about me being there. He didn't want his family to be there. But then he kept going back and forth. He didn't want anybody to witness his execution, because he didn't want to put that trauma onto any of us that care about ending the death penalty. And then finally, like Jeff said, just a couple weeks before he was executed, Arthur finally agreed to let Jeff be his spiritual advisor. And they were together in his final moments. But over the 6, 8, probably more months that I knew Arthur, he kept telling me he was innocent, but there wasn't really much to go off of. And so it wasn't until the last couple of weeks that Arthur was alive that his attorneys, his brand new attorneys that had only been on his case a couple of months, found evidence that not only he was innocent, but that the state intentionally withheld. And they were still making Arthur to be this monster. And so as soon as Arthur was executed with Kosul, I was mad, but I was absolutely devastated with Arthur. I was so angry. I just wanted to scream and break things. I was so upset, so mad. And so the first chapter we end up writing was Rage, because I know that that is something that we all feel with the death penalty at different times. And it very much was relevant for me during Arthur's execution, and I'm sure Jeff too. Jeff, do you want to continue on the discussion about Rage?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I've consistently experienced, and this was true with Arthur's execution, as I was sitting there with him, as the execution approached, one of the things that Texas does is they have this big spread of food right there in like literally steps from the execution chamber. And that food is there for, all of the guards and all the people who work there and, whatnot. And it's been my experience that the person who is condemned can see the food and engage with the food, but not necessarily are they allowed to eat any of the food. And for that matter, who wants to eat a bunch of ham sandwiches when you're about to be executed? And one of the things that I found so inappropriate in that moment was the guards kept on offering me food. And here is this person that, doesn't want to eat, can't eat, and they just kept on offering me food. And I was so enraged that not only were they just mindlessly offering me food, I was enraged that they kept on interrupting my time with Arthur. And, you begin to ask the question of what causes such indifference? I mean, what causes such a lack of humanity? And I think that in those times where I've been in the execution chamber with these guys, even a few weeks ago with Anthony Sanchez, the indifference is what brings about rage in me. But at the same time, if I left myself at rage, I couldn't do the work that I do, the other work that I do. So I've chosen to use the rage as a deeply spiritual thing that fuels the rest of my work. And there's a lot of people who say, don't be angry, don't be, don't hate, don't do this, don't do that. I am of the persuasion that rage is very important. In fact, it's a sign that we actually care. And I think for as far as my prayer life is concerned, and Alli and I certainly talked about this, there are times where I pray, God, give me rage. God, don't let me just think about the death penalty. Don't just let me just, attend a vigil. Don't let me just, be worried, or, all of these different kind of partial sounding emotions. But God, help me to rage. And I want to rage against injustice. I don't want to just be passively angry. God, give me rage.
Yeah. And then I think after rage, maybe we should go to grief, just because I think they go hand in hand. I think I'm at least, when I go through these executions, and Anthony Sanchez is, I believe, the eighth person I've known that was executed. Certainly I wasn't very close to all of them, but he was like the ninth person I've known that's been executed. And I mean, I definitely think that we can all, we all know what it feels like to go through these executions, and just to be so upset about them, even if you don't know the person. But personally, especially when I know the person, and I know you know this all too well, Jeff, I think it kind of flip-flops back and forth with me. Sometimes I'm angry, sometimes I'm just completely devastated. And so I think grief goes hand in hand with rage, and they seem sometimes kind of weird emotions to put together. But I think in this work, they go together very well.
Ask a question.
Yes.
So you made a statement there. You said we all know what it feels like to go to these executions, but I'm not sure that's true for everybody. I'm looking in the audience. I don't know everyone, but I think it might be helpful if you and Jeff spell out a little bit what does it feel like to be standing outside the prison, or for Jeff, what does it feel like to be in that death chamber?
I think I misspoke. I meant, how do I say this? Not physically. We don't all physically know what it means to be there, but certainly we can speak about that. But I think also, like many of us show up to the execution vigils, we are in a space of community when these executions happen. So even if we're not physically at the execution chamber or at the prison where the execution's happening, I think many of us still know what it feels like to experience all of the legal proceedings, and getting to know the family, getting to know the condemned person, and then watching them be executed. But Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts on that, just to kind of bridge what Abe said and what you're saying. I mean, there's a story in scripture where Lazarus is dead, and Jesus is going to raise Lazarus from the dead. Or, well, you don't know that that's going to happen, but that's part of the story, is that Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. Well, when Jesus comes up and is hold on, everybody. Wait on you. Okay, I'll come back in a little bit. Okay, love you. I apologize, everyone, but you can't blame me for speaking to such a beautiful woman. But anyways, so Lazarus, when they get there, there's women who are wailing at the tomb of Lazarus. And oftentimes in the Jewish tradition of the time, cultural tradition of the time, sometimes people would get paid to grieve. And it would be this very performative grief. Sometimes I struggle with our vigils. And part of the reason for that is I sometimes wonder if we're not in a moment where grief becomes performative. And does grief become something that we have to do? Or is grief sincere? And of course, there's no really way to measure that or know that. But I do think sometimes it's okay to say, hey, I didn't know this guy. I didn't, have this. I mean, I think that it's horrible that this person was executed, but I didn't have this super close relationship with them. And so perhaps there are times where grief is not as visceral as other times. And perhaps there are times where grief is something that we feel so deeply and immensely that it's difficult to continue. Mm-hmm. And so I think grief has all sorts of, expressions and whatnot. And I can tell you that this year, having been in the execution chamber with someone who was executed 3 different times, I felt differently every time. I grieved differently every time. I know with Anthony, I mean, I had such an extended relationship with Anthony. I mean, speaking every night at 8:00 for close to a year. Yeah, that grief was different. Scott Eisenberg, when he was executed, he was definitely in this kind of fight mode and pushing back and whatnot. And that was different. With Arthur, truth be known, I barely knew Arthur. And I remember Arthur telling me before he went in the execution chamber that he was going to wiggle his foot to let me know that, to bring me a little bit of comfort and know that, we're doing this together. That's what he kept on saying. We're doing this together. And I think with Arthur, my grief has been that I missed that foot. I missed that foot shaking. And so I don't necessarily know what grief is supposed to look like, but I do know it's something that we feel and not something that we perform. Mm-hmm. And I also know that grief is something that we can embrace, and we don't have to push back, and we don't have to say, I'm not, I don't want any of that because that hurts too bad. But I think if we allow ourselves to feel, whether it's rage or grief, we are better abolitionists. Mm-hmm. We are more honest abolitionists. We are truthful abolitionists. Again, it's that embodiment of rage. It's that embodiment of grief. And as we embody these emotions, we become more honest, visceral abolitionists.
Yeah. I just wanted to touch on, I know you and I spoke, especially when we were making this book, how unique the grief with the death penalty is. So when I first got into death penalty work, I was doing hospice caregiving. So I was already around death a lot. And certainly the first time and the second and the third time I had lost patients I was taking care of, it was a lot for me because I had only lost like 2 people during the whole course of my life. And so I did not experience a lot of death growing up. And when you get into death penalty work and you get to know the people that are being executed, I always say the people behind the crime, because what you see in the media and what you see the courts and the state saying about these people is never the full story. But when you get to know the person, who they actually are, and their families and the people that care about them, losing them in this way is so different than losing anybody else. And I'm not saying that death is not a sad thing. It is a sad thing. But when you take generally a fully healthy person in their, they are maybe halfway through their life by the time they're executed, and you take them out for something that happened in many cases decades ago, strap them to a gurney, they're helpless, there is no fighting back, and you kill them. It just knowing everything that's going into that, the psychological torture of the months and the days and the hours and the minutes leading up to execution, and what they're going through, what their family's going through, waiting for the courts to intervene or the Board of Pardon and Paroles, and being denied one place only to be granted something another place, and then a decision's appealed, and all this stuff constantly happening back and forth, hope, and then losing hope, and then gaining hope again, and then losing hope again. This whole cycle, it's just so different than what you experience any other time somebody dies, whether it's like they had a disease and it took a while for them to die, or whatever happens. And I think that's what makes this work so much more difficult, because once I started experiencing these executions, it almost felt like, I don't know how to say this the right way, it almost felt like normal dying was not, yes, it was still sad, but it just did not feel the same way as this, because this is so, there's so much that goes in with it. It is so disturbing what happens with these executions. And I mean, I don't know that I can put into words, and I mean, we tried to in the book, but I don't even know if the book fully encapsulates this very bizarre feeling of going through a death penalty execution. And yeah, it just, I think it just makes the grief so much worse than it ever normally is. And yeah, I don't, it's like exponentially worse. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, you mentioned hope, and I was thinking about this idea of hope. And this is not an endorsement of his presidential campaign, but Cornel West talks about, he's got a book, he's got some rhymes, he kind of plays with this idea a lot, but the phrasing of it would be hope on a tightrope. And I feel like that best describes how I engage this work. I mean, even at the very end, there's always the question of, do you think they're really going to do it? I remember Anthony, an hour or two before saying, do you think they're really going to do it? Do you think that they're going to stop? Do you think that this is going to happen? And yeah, I mean, on some level, hope seems ludicrous in that moment. But if you don't have hope, what else do you have?
Right.
And I think that's the piece that, is that embodiment of abolition. Abolition in and of itself is hopeful. It is hope. And so, yes, we rage. Yes, we grieve. But what keeps us going is the hope that we can be a part of ending this. That the next execution will be the last execution. I mean, even right now with Jedediah Murphy, I mean, we have such hope that this is not going to happen. We also have a Supreme Court that is, constantly, I feel like, knocking down our hope. But yet we hope. And, sometimes hope is a little bit more realistic than others, but perhaps not to hope is the least realistic way of being. Because hope is always something that travels with us, keeps us breathing. They always say that you're not promised the next breath or the next day or whatever, but we fill our lungs with the hope that We will, we breathe with the hope that we will exhale. We put one foot in front of the other with the hope that we will walk. And I think the work of the abolitionists is that visceral grinding day in and day out, that hope that by grinding, we will be able to grind down the machinery of death.
I'm just looking at our list of chapters. I don't know. I feel like this would be a good opportunity to move into the fight, because you talked about rage and grief and all these emotions kind of being the fuel to our fight. And I know when Jeff and I were discussing this chapter before it was actually written, we were going back and forth and talking about how exhausting this work is, but how meaningful it is. And with work that's so exhausting, so traumatic, like I can't think of very many other types of work where you're constantly beat down and experiencing such intense trauma like you are in this work. But it is the hope that we're going to do something to stop all these executions, but then also save individual people along the way. And I don't know where my brain is going, but between go ahead.
I was just going to say, you can't do this work unless you're prepared to embody the fight. I mean, because it's not like you're going into, a boxing ring and you're trying to go, 10, 11 rounds. It's like you're sitting in a boxing ring and living day in and day out. Like it's not just a one-time event. It's a lifestyle. It's not just a one-time, fight. It's not just Jedediah Murphy. It's a lifestyle. And, I think I was thinking as you were talking, Alli, that I've worked with, dozens and dozens and dozens of guys over the years. And the executions that have been stopped, I can count on, one or two hands. Most people would say those are not the odds I want to play. I'm not interested in this fight. I'm not interested in the struggle anymore. But I think for the abolitionists, they can't breathe without the struggle. They can't breathe without the fight because they know what is right. They know what is just, and they cannot move. They cannot sit down. They cannot be shaken without keeping the fight, without staying in the arena. And so I think that this idea of fight is something that exists in our bones. And if we let it permeate, if we let it sit there and fester, we're not going to be able to just say, I'm done.
Yeah, there's no way to get out of this work once you're in it, especially when you care so much about it. And I mean, this is kind of a side thing, but my mom always tells me to take a break and to disengage and to, like, she'll literally take me to the middle of the forest with no cell service just to disengage. And I'm still thinking about the death penalty and what's coming up. And it's not, once you're in it for life. There's no getting out of it. And I think many of the people here that are fully committed to this effort can understand that this is something, like Jeff said, you just know that it is so incredibly wrong that you're not going to stop until it's over. And it may be a while till it's over. So we're just going to keep on going until nobody else has to be executed. Go ahead.
Before you jump on, I was going to say that something else that I've thought about is how the fight of abolition extends to all these other places in your life. I feel like when people say, well, we're fighting for racial justice, or we're fighting for economic justice. And I say, well, that's impossible. I think about the death penalty and I think about abolition, and I'm like, no, it's not impossible. And the odds, we've always worked with slim odds, but those slim odds have educated me that the hope of justice is something that we must keep, because justice is always possible. I mean, it's like Dr. King said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
I'm just thinking, do you want to go to humanity next, or what about truth? Because I feel like this chapter is very relevant to especially what happened with Anthony.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and tell y'all a story, a shocking story. There was a guy that I worked with a number of years ago. I'm not going to say what state. I'm not going to say where, because I think it's important to leave some of those details out. But I worked with him for years. He told me that he was innocent, and I spouted out that he was innocent everywhere I went. And we ended up getting new lawyers and all sorts of things. And at the end of the campaign, we ended up getting him off of death row. And he looked at me outside of the courtroom and basically said, "Gotcha." And the entire time, like, I had been lied to. And I don't, on some level, I don't hold any sort of grudge or anything like that against him, because he was doing what he had to do to survive, or what he thought he had to do to survive. But at the same time, truth is an interesting phenomenon in the work of the abolitionists, because on so many of these cases, you just don't know, and you never will know. Mm-hmm. And so your choices are believe what this person who has, obviously a deep reason to tell you whatever you want to hear so that you will help them. Or do you remain skeptical of everybody and not have any sort of trust or hope? I know that I've engaged with a number of campaigns in recent months, and for that matter, recent years, where I look at the campaign and I go, this is not real. Like, these facts, I know that these facts are not real. I know that what we're seeing is not real. How do we deal with that? How do we engage with that? That's something that me and Alli talked a lot about. And I think for me, I think different people would have different opinions. But for me, my integrity is incredibly important. It is, it is something that, I believe. I mean, the scriptures talk about, Jesus says, the truth shall set you free. I cannot function in a space where I know that I am being lied to, or even I know that I am telling lies. Certainly, there are folks who I am convinced that there are people on death row who are able to convince themselves of all sorts of things. After spending decades on death row, I am convinced that there are plenty of people who say that they're innocent and they're actually very guilty. But for the abolitionist, it doesn't change the focus of the work, and that is to save their life, to end the death penalty. But what it does do is it does take us to this space of this torturous space of trying to maintain your own integrity while responding to what people say and what people tell you. And so I think this space of truth is probably one of the most convoluted and complicated areas of the work.
I just want to interject real quick before we turn it over to Mike Sussman, because I know you have to go in a few minutes, but I know when we were talking about the truth chapter, you posed the question of, would you be willing to lie to save a life? And I think for many of us, the answer is yes. And it's kind of this weird position to be in because we want to maintain our integrity. That is very important to us. In many instances, people who are against abolitionists, sorry for my language, think we're full of shit a lot of the time. And they don't think that anything we have to say is legitimate. And that is far from true. Me and Jeff, and I know others, operate from a space where we are going to push what we believe is genuinely true. And in some cases, that becomes really difficult. And you have to kind of pick between saving a life and being honest. And of course, we want to save a life, but it's not a comfortable space to be in. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mike.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I have to go right now. It's something, I'm just getting a call about Jedediah. I'll try to be back in a moment, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Well, Alli, as you were talking, I wanted to to say this: would you lie to save a life? That is something that I greatly struggle with, because I'm not sure that a lie can save a life. But it's complicated. I mean, there's a part of me that thinks, well, if you lie, you're losing something, you're losing life. So I don't know the answer to that. I know it's very complicated and something I've struggled with throughout my work as an abolitionist.
I can jump in here for just a moment. We have struggled at Death Penalty Action at times, finding that sometimes information that's presented as part of casework is not entirely true. For example, when exaggerations are made about a person, a defendant's mental capacity, for Death Penalty Action, we always try to make sure that we're presenting what is factual and known to be true. And if we don't know it's to be true, then we say that. And I think that just in the context of this conversation, I want to make it clear that that's the position for Death Penalty Action. And it's hard for us sometimes when even in an upcoming case, there's information being presented that seems a little bit shady. And we can't say or do anything about it. It's not our information or our presentation. But that's out there and it happens. And sometimes that's what I think we all get to live with our own level of integrity. We do need to start writing it down. I want to make sure that Cantor Sussman has a chance to make his comments and invite people. There's a couple of really nice comments in the chat. If anybody wants to add a question or a comment in the chat, then please do so now. And Cantor Sussman, hope you got some good news.
No news. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, first I should say no news. I just got a call from Jedediah Murphy's spiritual advisor. Jedediah is the one who's scheduled for possible execution tonight. And I took the call because I wasn't sure if he knew something that we didn't. He doesn't. And we are all in the same torturous place of not knowing. So it's just further confirmation of exactly everything you've been saying from the start of the hour. So I just want to say how much of an honor it was to be asked by you guys to write the afterword to this book. It's a powerful book, and it is very much what it is advertised. I see you guys as the embodiment of abolition. And I meant to bring the book with me here for this, and I don't know if you saw, Jeff, when you were talking at the beginning, I there was a loud noise, and then I made a sound. I was looking for the book, and I went up to my shelf up here, and the book wasn't there, but this is what fell down.
Oh,
And it knocked the mute button off. And so Kosul has made an entry, and he is making his presence known. I told Jedediah I had a dream about Kosul the other night. So for those who don't know, as has been mentioned here, Kosul was one of the first that really, for me, brought me together with Alli and Jeff, amongst other cases. But we fought for him. Jeff wrote this book, The Fight for Kosul, and with the afterword by Alli, and we fought for him. So I had this dream the other night that he was talking to me about the execution of John Ramirez, and that he was smiling, and that we were having a steak dinner at Texas Steakhouse. And so I told Jedediah about this, and I said I think he needed to hear this, that he had visited me. And so yeah, we are involved. We know these are, it's not just the idea, it's the theory of abolition. It's not we're not talking about this academically. These are human beings that you are getting to know directly. I'm in touch with most of them, via email, phone call sometimes. You're often on the ground, in person with them. Jeff, you're in the chamber with them. So you see more than most the torture that you've outlined, and that continues to be going on as we speak right now for Jedediah, who is enduring the same torture that so many countless others before him. As you said, Anthony said an hour before, are they really going to do this? Well, are they really going to do this now to Jedediah? So it was an honor it is an honor to stand with you and to support the sacred work you do, to be present, to be in this sacred place. It's a sacred ground, like in front of the burning bush when Hashem said to Moses, "Take off your shoes, for where you stand is sacred ground." The sacred ground enables you to witness and to bring to everyone the torture that's going on. And we're now witnessing awful things going on in our world, and we pray for peace. We pray for no more killings. And so this is aligned with that. As I see what's going on in the Middle East, we are praying, we are working for no more killings. So my heart is heavy with that as well going on now, and I just wanted to support you and to say how grateful I am, and I know the members of our group are, L'chaim, Jews Against the Death Penalty, for the sacred work you continue to do. So thank you, and may we soon see the end of this horror in our day.
Thank you, Mike.
definitely.
I was thinking as we were talking, Mike, you brought up the crises in Israel and Gaza. I find myself, when I think about these kind of geopolitical conflicts, feeling the same way as I do about the death penalty, in that it seems impossible. It seems absolutely impossible to do anything to stop this, to engage, and to do. Obviously, if I could, I want to stand right there between Israel and Gaza, and obviously to have said stop before Hamas invades, to say stop as Gaza is getting bombed, to just be able to put my hands out and say stop. But perhaps this embodiment of abolition, this embodiment of peace and justice and righteousness, is the willingness to stand there, the knowledge that that's where you want to be, the knowledge that that you have again, that willingness, that visceralness of standing in the gap and saying, I don't have to choose violence, I don't have to choose death, I don't have to choose all of this killing and all of this nastiness. I can stand and be a witness for life.
Amen. That's why we're l'chaim. We are for life. we choose life, and we don't choose killing. So amen. I want to apologize. I do have to step away. But again, it's an honor to stand with you, and may we go from strength to strength and soon see an end to this horror.
We love you, Mike. Thank you.
Mike.
Okay, I love you too.
I mean, I think we only have 1 or 2 chapters left. What do you want to keep going, or do you want to start wrapping up?
Why don't you just say the 2 chapters, what they are, and then we can go to questions if anybody has any thoughts, and then we can wrap it up.
Sure. So I lied. There's 3 chapters plus a couple blog posts that we put in here about Anthony. There's humanity, isolation, and success. And I think a lot of what we spoke about today kind of hits on those, even if indirectly. So yeah, does anybody have any questions for us?
I was going to say quickly before we go to questions, I was going to speak all but briefly about isolation.
Mm-hmm.
And how like that the nature of the work is standing alone. When I'm in that execution chamber, there is nobody there with me. With all of this stuff with Anthony, I think that was one of the hardest parts, is that, even though, I have friends and, Emily, my wife, and our kids, I mean, they knew Anthony, but I just can't, we all don't feel the same. We all don't think the same. And certainly when these types of things happen, they exaggerate our solitude. But I do think that in that solitude, we can find comfort in knowing that we are not alone. Whatever you call it, whether you call it God, whether you call it Jehovah or light or love, there is something there with us. And maybe it's that hope, or maybe it's something else. There's something that keeps us moving. And so in our solitude, perhaps we find that which makes us feel most accompanied or most alive.
I'm not sure that there's any questions for us. There's a lot of nice comments though. Do you want to just wrap it up?
Yeah. Hey, did you have something?
No, I just wanted to say thank you all for making the time today to spur this conversation. I put the link where people can pick up the book in the chat. Did we have a link in the registration to you were going to send a free copy to everybody? Did we do that?
We haven't done it, but what we can do, I had already thought about that. Everybody who is registered here or who is with us right now, either send an email or a message to the Death Penalty Action Facebook page, and we will get you a copy.
You don't even have to do that. We have all of the addresses that people use to register. So we'll just go ahead and send that link to people. So don't worry about buying the book unless you want to. Now what we'll send will be a PDF and not the actual printed copy that you would get from Amazon, but that's your choice. So with that, I guess it's time for some closing thoughts. And I will just say that I think that this was a wonderful contribution to the discourse today and to the movement. There's just a lot to this work. And for those of us that have been in the struggle for a long time, last night overnight, I got to be with people that have been doing this work for, a couple of people for more than 30 years, like myself, and some people that were just brand new, relatively speaking, to the work, and we got to talk about the struggle. It's a little bit different when you're doing an all-night vigil, and you have that kind of time. So I hope we can have more conversations like this, and I'm grateful to Alli and Jeff for spurring this one.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I wanted to say how thankful I am for Alli. And she's one of these people that I've gotten to know. Um, it's kind of funny, like what does, a 40-year-old man with, 5 kids, a wife, and trying to put all this stuff together have in common with, a 22, right? Or 21,
21.
21-year-old college student. But what this experience and her friendship has shown me is that as we embody abolition, we become closer and dearer friends and closer confidants and colleagues with those who do the same thing. And so whether you're 100 or 16 or 21 or 45 or however old you are, wherever your space in life is, as we come to embody abolition, we create community in abolition. And so I'm just so thankful for Alli, and she is wonderful. And she's going to write hundreds of books in her life and read every one of them.
We'll see. I'm already on track for number 2, but it might take a while.
So, well, let me y'all know I always gotta close this out with a benediction. So, Abe, if you'll give me that liberty, we'll be done.
Well, go right ahead. And I'll just say that before you do, I'm looking at the docket for Jedediah Murphy, and all we see so far is the application to vacate the state from the state of Texas. So this is going to come down to the wire. We'll see people back here at, I guess, at 5 o'clock Central Time is when we'll start the virtual vigil and be together as we wait for the word as to whether it's going to happen. Keep Jedediah in your prayers because, he's certainly being transported soon, if not already, from the Ponsky unit in Livingston, Texas, over to the Huntsville unit in Huntsville, Texas, also known as the Walls unit. So
yes, his final visits are ending here in the next minute and a half, and he will be transported imminently.
Okay, so with that, Jeff, bless us out of here.
May the God whose name is love, may the God whose name is justice, may the God whose name is hope, whose name is fight, help you in this hour to embody love, to embody justice, to embody fight, to embody abolition.